The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
All right, is Donald Trump serious about a run for the White House? Will his reignition of the birther controversy prove a viable strategy? Donald Trump joins us now by the phone. Mr. Trump, thanks for being with us.
Good morning.
Well, let's just start right there. If you want to be taken seriously as a presidential candidate, do you think this issue of the president's birth is the most serious issue facing the country that you could use your considerable profile and popularity to raise, or does it feed into the perception that this is just kind of a sideshow?
Well, I do think it's a serious issue, Savannah, but I also think that a lot of people, frankly, like yourselves and Joe and Mika, they bring it up as the first question. Bill O'Reilly, who's on tonight, and we're going to discuss China and other things, but the fact is that Bill O'Reilly, the first question he asked me was about the birther.
But well, wait a minute, Mr. Trump, but you are a sophisticated consumer of media. You know that if you raise this issue, that is going to catch headlines. You could downplay it.
Well, no,
you could end this
issue
right now if you wanted to.
I am embracing the issue, and I'm proud of the issue. I think somebody has to embrace it because, frankly, the people that are, and I don't like the name birther, but because I think it's very unfair and I think it's very derogatory to a lot of very good people that happen to think that there's a possibility that this man was not born in this country. And by the way, if that were true, you know, it's very interesting. If that were true, it would be the greatest scam in the history of this country. So I feel that there is certainly a chance that he was not born in this country. Now, if he were not born in this country, that means he can't be president. It's very simple. Arnold Schwarzenegger cannot run for president because he wasn't born in the country. The problem that I have is it's hit such a nerve that every time I talk to you and Chuck, who I respect dearly and greatly, as you know, I think you're two great pros. But look at the first question you asked me. It's about the birther. Why don't you ask me about China? Why don't you ask me about the fact that OPEC is ripping us off? Why don't you ask me about the fact that the Arab League is asking us to fight and they're not paying us for it? I mean,
well,
I'd
let me
love
ask
you to
you
do
this,
that,
though.
but you start off with the birther.
Oh, wait a minute. Let me ask you this. Why do you believe this do you really believe that the Clinton machine, circa 2007, actually didn't spend some time looking in this? Do you really believe that John McCain and the Clinton campaign really would have rolled over and participated in this grand conspiracy? That's what I've never understood about this.
It's not that much of a conspiracy. It's very simple.
It's an incredible conspiracy.
It's really not, Chuck. Chuck, it's really not. If you look at what's taken place, it's really not. He came in, we all agree, he was born, okay? We're all so happy that he was born. Okay, now, the ad was put in. It's very unusual for people to put ads in, but it was 3 days later.
Notices and death notices are standard.
It was 3 days later, 3 days after the fact. Many things could have happened, and he doesn't have a birth certificate, and his family is arguing over which hospital he was born in. The family doesn't even know the name of the hospital. No nurses, no doctors, nobody ever came forward. And by the way, there's a huge difference between a birth certificate and a certificate of birth. One confirms the records and records the newborn's identity in great detail, and the other one just said somebody was born. So it's a huge difference. But do you know that if you have a certificate of birth, you can't get a driver's license? Do you know that if you have a certificate of birth, you can't get a marriage license?
Can I just ask a question? So just so we understand your theory here.
Are we going to get to China soon?
I do want to get to China.
Yes, although I have to say, Mr. Trump, this issue irritates you, and yet you're clinging to the theory.
No, it doesn't irritate me at all. It irritates everybody else, and I don't understand it. But I will tell you, a poll just came out where 50-some-odd% of the Republicans think that he wasn't born in this country. So obviously there are a lot of smart people thinking maybe it's so.
Well, let me ask you this.
Savannah, why doesn't he issue his birth certificate?
He did.
He did. He put it on the website. But let me ask you something, Mr. Trump. I just want to make sure I understand the theory here. You're saying he was born somewhere else. I suppose you're thinking maybe it was Kenya, and the parents called Hawaii to have the birth announcement placed in anticipation that a few decades later?
Savannah, he could have come in after birth, and a lot of people might want to be registered for purposes of hospitalization, for purposes of welfare, for purposes they might want to be registered as a citizen of this country.
Wasn't the birth announcement contemporaneous with his birth?
No, because it wasn't filed contemporaneously. It was filed sometime later.
The news in a newspaper.
Excuse me. I've grown up watching some of the great thieves of the world, some of the great, most dishonest people. This is peanuts compared to what some of these bad guys do. So don't tell me. I want to see the birth certificates of it. It's very simple. Not a certificate of birth, which means almost nothing, which people can get very easily. A birth certificate is very hard to get.
My two kids they only got certificates of live birth from the District of Columbia. But I want to talk about...
I'll bet you that's not right. I'll bet you that if you go to the hospital where your children were born, you will get from them the approval to go down to the Department of Health and your kids have birth certificates. Unless they weren't born in this, by the way, Chuck, unless they weren't born in this country, which I assume they were, I will get a birth certificate for your children.
Thank you. I want to talk about...
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.